Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava, and this is Speedplay, Papal Italy number 11. We're at war with most of our neighboring states, and our armies are now just going to flow into the Spanish countryside. We've had them all set up since last episode, and now we can just rove on through. I noticed that we're starting to recruit a lot of regiments just on islands and other various places out of the way, and we just sort of steamroll into the Spanish armies, which is probably going to cause quite a bit of damage. Austria declared war on the North Germans, which is interesting. And while we are taking some severe losses against the Spanish since we weren't very tactical with our invasion, we just overwhelmed them with such numbers that it doesn't matter. I realize that this is exactly the sort of thinking that I said I was going to try to avoid last time around. Unfortunately, I guess I didn't end up avoiding it very much at all, just because of the relative ease with which I considered the Spanish campaign. And unfortunately, I don't believe we will be able to take both of the Spanish provinces we need, as it just costs more than 100% war score, and they're not going to accept that. However, that does mean all we'll have to do is declare another war against them later, after a 5-year truce, which will happen fairly quickly and be resolved fairly quickly as well. Now, some of our armies are starting to be less than 30,000 men in total, just because of all of the, conflicts we've been fighting. I do believe we have gas attack now, which does mean that we're just going to keep rampaging through all of the enemy armies until they get to gas defense. And they can't even get gas defense until they have the necessary tech to get gas attack. And we do get jingoism just then, so we do add additional war goals. And really the goal is to just get up to 100% or as close as we can against everybody, just because it's a bit easier. Now, against Egypt, for whatever reason, they're incredibly expensive to attack. So, with that said, we're probably going to have to just get some odd and ugly borders with the Egyptians for the near future. However, that's just more encouragement to clean them up later. Against the French, we've basically just added all the war goals that we really want. We could just keep them in the war because why not? So we're probably going to do that at least to some extent. We're going to also go after Spanish Cuba, and really just their colonies in North America that are still under their control. Not for any real reason, simply because, if we do end up going to war against the United States, it would be helpful. We also now apparently have a large amount of French communist rebels in our newly acquired Madagascar. The Spanish are offering peace, and we could go ahead and accept that or not, depending. We're not actually going to accept it now, though, because we need to march into Portugal. So we go ahead and just reject it. French communists are overthrowing the state. We also, in the last moment, added the war goal to add France to our sphere of influence. That appears to be lasting all until their government is overthrown by communists, which will probably be about 3 or 4 months. However, it might give us a slight boon to our economy until then. And yes, if you're wondering about the what that implies, France is no longer a great power. They have declined that much in these last few years and wars. We also begin moving troops against Morocco, as that's going to be our next target. And just constantly holding elections, as is our way. France is most definitely going to fall to these rebels. They won't give us military access, so we're not going to help them. You'll notice we have a lot of party loyalty. More than anyone else in the world, but that's not surprising because we're constantly in elections. At any rate, we make peace with the Spanish, more or less just to hurry the amount of time. Well, basically so we can just hurry the next war. The British we can also go to war with in the near future, or hopefully just add more war goals against, and then go to another war in the near future, as we won't be able to get everything we want from the British in this war. That's really just unrealistic at this point. Now we are going to start building up new armies just throughout, and really just try to keep on the absolute cutting edge of the military in this game for as long as we can. I don't really have any doubts that we'll be able to maintain our position as the premier military power, and hopefully we will be able to also become the premier naval power, which would allow us to ship troops to, say, America if the need arises, which it might. Spain is also having a series of rebel problems, and we have to bring a group over to the UK. Now, one of the reasons I'm not just making peace with the UK and then declaring another war is now that we're at peace with the French, we don't have access through their lands, and it would just be a bit of a pain to re-invade the British Isles. At any rate, though, we are marching against Morocco at this point. We will just annex them since they are thankfully still an uncivilized nation. And yeah, we were very lucky to make peace with the French and Spanish when we did. The alternative would have been that we would end up fighting their rebels for them. And while that could have been partially good, as it means the French would not become communists and then not get the boon to industry, it's not really anything in particular. We get another jingoism event, so we're able to go ahead and start adding war goals. I realized that we were already at 100% with Egypt, so we just pieced them out. But the Ottomans and the British will add war goals against. The Ottomans, I believe we are now at essentially 100% or as close as we can expect, so we make peace with them. If we can just hurry up and annex Greece, we will have really their entire area, and we can just focus on digging deeper into the Balkans. Montenegro will also have our truce end with when we get the truce finished with the Greeks. I didn't realize that they were in the same war previously. We will correct that mistake. Now, at this point, we are either at war or have truces with all of the countries we want to fight. China peaced out with the Russians for white peace, which means, or status quo, so the Russians managed to win their intervention. And what we're going to do is probably fabricate a claim on Austria to liberate Hungary. We could either liberate Hungary or liberate Poland. I'm going to decide to go after Hungary, just because, well, I kind of feel like it. There was also a crisis that released Romania a moment ago, and it really seems as though Austria is just on its last legs. Now, they could probably have bounced back from that. Now that we're rolling in to take over Hungary from them, though, it's not very likely yet whatsoever. So our armies are just going to rove through. They had a grand total of 2 brigades, which I have not even been able to find. So I'm not too concerned by their military prowess, as it probably won't even come up, and we'll just sort of siege their territories, release Hungary, and then just rove back to our borders. Now, it is interesting releasing Hungary as opposed to Poland. The Poles don't have any cores on us while the Hungarians do. So arguably there is more reason to release Poland. However, we can always just come back. Now, we do have a liberal party in charge. Luckily, it has basically most of the policies that we support, except they are anti-military, which is just terrible and essentially a sin as far as I'm concerned. We do have another jingoism event, so we add war goals against the various states we're at war with, which at this point is just Britain and Portugal. And those are really the only 2 states we can fight for the near future, as everyone else has a truce with us. So, really, we're kind of stuck. Once we get the one final jingoism event, we'll be able to fully overthrow the Portuguese African colonies. We just need one more province from them, and we'll be able to peace out with them for the rest of the game, or until we decide to expand our ambitions. The British were almost certain, well, no, the British we certainly are going to have to fight another war against, simply because they have too large a presence in Africa. However, once that's done, one more war with the Spanish, a war with Greece and Montenegro, and we will have taken over basically everything that we want, which will be quite nice. And, yeah, that's really the gist of it. It would be an amazing boon for our country. Also, notice the Belgians are attacking France, and unfortunately they were attacked by the North Germans. However, I believe they've made peace with them. So the Belgians may end up getting Champagne, which would be... oh, there they go, they got it. So isn't that nice? France is just falling apart, and really it's just a boon to all the countries surrounding them. Our election's done, so we'll hold one more election, and since this is essentially the most peaceful war we've had to date, we're just going to keep speeding through it at a relatively high speed. The goal essentially being to just sort of wait out our people until they get jingoism. And we'll stay in this one quick session. We'll just stay in it for the next few minutes, a little bit further than we usually take these, just so that our truce with Greece and Montenegro ends, and we'll be again fabricating a claim on the Greeks, which will just be for their annexation, which will allow us to finish off their peninsula, all said and done, and that will be quite nice. And yeah, that's essentially the gist of it. We may even... Oh, we have Hungarians in our sphere of influence since we released them. Once the North Germans do form Germany, we might release Poland, Lithuania from them, the Russians, and the Austrians, and get a massive new Polish country that will hopefully just help us quite a bit. Or, well, not really help us, but just sort of hinder all of the other countries. At this point, that's really all we'll be able to do, is just declare various wars, because we kind of want to, and with the intent of really just turning the world into, or in a direction that we would prefer it to be in. So countries like the Russian Empire will probably just start to more or less tear apart by releasing countries, say, Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, probably Georgia and some other ones in the Caucasus, just so that we don't actually have to touch them if we don't want to. At any rate, here's our Spanish War. We've lost proportionally a lot of men. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.